Welcome to Dan the Road Trip Guy. I'm your host, Dan, and each week we'll embark on a new adventure, discovering memory and life lessons of our incredible guests. From everyday travelers to thrill seekers and everyone in between, this podcast is your front row seat to inspiring stories of passion, resilience, and the pursuit of happiness. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. I am excited for today's show, and I know you're going to enjoy it. My guest is Sean Dietrich. Sean is a storyteller, columnist, author, musician, and podcaster. He has a brand new book out called Over Yonder, and I would highly suggest you pick up a copy. Once I started reading it, I could not stop, and I am not one for reading novels. Now, Sean and I don't know each other personally. Linda and I had the opportunity to see him at the Grand Ole Opry last November. And the good news for my Cincinnati listeners, he's coming to our city on November 2nd at the Century 21 Theater in Oakley. I would highly encourage you to get tickets and come out and enjoy an evening with Sean. If you want to get a sampling of his work, he has a great podcast. It comes out every few mornings, and it's called Sean of the South. You can also find him online at Sean of the South or SeanDietrich.com. I'll post some links in the show note. I hope you enjoy the show. Well, welcome to the show, Sean.
Proud to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time. My listeners may not know who you are, so why don't you take a couple minutes and just tell them who is Sean Dietrich?
Well, Sean Dietrich doesn't exactly know who Sean Dietrich is all the time, but I am a writer, a musician, and a stand-up storyteller, a humorist, and I kind of travel around country telling stories and playing songs for people and hopefully trying to put them in a good mood. And that's kind of the goal of the books I write, newspaper things I write, and stuff I put out online. And everything is hopefully to put someone in a good mood.
Well, I know from personal experience they do. And where are you from originally?
Well, I grew up in Northwest Florida, close to the Alabama line. So I think it was about 38 or 40 miles from the Alabama line. Our county touches Alabama. So that's a part of the world that we call LA, Lower Alabama. Even the folks live in Florida aren't really sure whether they're Floridians with Alabama accents or Alabamans with a Florida driver's license. Anyway, that's where I grew up. Now I live in Birmingham.
Okay.
With my wife. That's me.
That's you. I appreciate that. We got to see Sean at the Grand Ole Opry last November, and now he's coming to Cincinnati for those listening that are in the Cincinnati area on November 2nd. So get your tickets for that. We're just going to have a little road trip conversation together. This is Dan the Road Trip Guy, Sean. So my first question is always, what was your first car?
Well, my first car was a truck, and it was a Chevy. Ford is what I drive now, but it was a Chevy, and it was a good car, a good truck. I've had multiple trucks in my life, but I look back on this one with fondness. I think it was a 1979 truck.
Okay.
I think. And I saw it in traffic. Like after I got rid of it, I would continually see that truck in traffic driving around town, and I'd have all these memories come back to me.
Any funny car stories with that truck or trucks after?
I have one car story that took place in a truck. It wasn't my truck, but it was my good friend's truck, and it's a good story.
Okay.
He bought this truck. I went with him to look, and he bought this truck from a guy, and he really liked it. It was an old truck. I think it was a Ford, like an F-100, late 70s, I think. And he got it. He was driving away, and back then we were, buying cars to the thrifty nickel. As he was driving away, he got a phone call, I guess the day after, and the guy realized that he'd left a lottery ticket in the truck, and it was like a winning ticket, I guess, or to some degree. I don't know that it wasn't the big boy, but it was a winner. I can't remember how he got in touch with my friend, but we drove back over there because we couldn't find the ticket. Together, they tore the truck apart and found the ticket beneath something in one of the floorboards. It had slipped down.
Oh, my.
And sure enough, it was a winning ticket, and the guy was so eternally grateful. And I think he even gave my friend some of the winnings just as a thank you.
That's a interesting story for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been on some road trips in your life. Any epic road trips that stand out, just so memorable that it's like, oh, I would do that one again?
Yeah, there's been several. I wrote a book that included one epic road trip. That was my first nonfiction long form book. That included a road trip I took to go see my father's grave. We scattered his ashes when I was a kid on
Hmm.
top of Pike's Peak in Colorado. I tried to get back out there when I was a young man to visit his grave, and decided that while I was out there, halfway out there, I didn't want to. I wasn't ready, so I turned around and came back. And then later in my life, I went for the first time, and that road trip was with my wife, with my dog had recently passed, so we took her ashes with us too, because me and that dog were very close. And so anyway, that trip was pivotal. It was really pivotal for me, because I finally returned back to the top of that mountain where he was, and we went across. I mean, at the time we were living in Northwest Florida. To get from Northwest Florida to Colorado, that's like I think it took us 5 days. It was a special trip. It was my father's from southeastern Kansas, right where Kansas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas almost touch. And we went through his hometown, went back through places that I'd lived as a child that were just kind of traumatic. They had traumatic memories for me because my father died in a real ugly way. He took his own life, and he went out with a lot of abuse and bad things.
Hmm.
On the way back, it was an extremely healing, cathartic, wonderful trip. And it all kind of ended literally with a mountaintop experience. And it was probably the most memorable road trip of my life.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine the memories that would have come back and the thoughts during a trip like that.
It was, there were a lot of layers to it. I was already riding at the time. So as we were driving through into, a foreign territory, I was recognized a few times. I was in Dodge City, Kansas, and someone was like, "Are you Sean Dietrich?" And it just about choked on my spit. Couldn't believe that someone knew who I was. And I just was receiving a lot of affirmations and validations I didn't know that I needed, that all kind of helped heal me from the inside out. That also, as I said earlier, started kind of kicked off my career in with the publishing side of life. So it was a very formative trip for me.
The book is entitled, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? A memoir of learning to believe you're going to be okay. Borrowed a line from the write-up of the book, and it simply states, a story that will stay with you long after the final page. The book testifies to the strength that lives within us all to make our peace with the past and look forward to the future with renewed hope and wonder. I hope you'll pick up a copy. I know I'm going to. Yeah, we'll talk about your new one a little bit later, but in my enjoyment of it. How old were you when your father passed away?
I was 11 years old.
Okay.
11 years old, and he went out. It was not a pretty way. The night before, he just kind of lost his mind. My last image of my father is him walking into a sheriff's cruiser in the back seat, and that was it. They took him off to jail. He was probably going to be put on trial for trying to harm and kill my mother and my sister and I. That was traumatic, and I've dealt with that for the rest of my life. So
Sure. Wow.
that alone is what made that trip kind of special.
Sure. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Oh yeah.
Now, I read up on you a little bit. It said I think it said from the time you were 5, you knew you wanted to be a writer, a storyteller. Take me on that journey and what that looks like.
Yeah, I don't know how it started. I know that as I look backward on my life, I can see now the arc of the story. I can see now who I really was before I even knew who I was. And now I know why certain adults encouraged me to pursue this or that, because they could see, as an adult sees a child, they could see where my talents and where my interests lie. And that's so interesting to me, because as a child, you're so unaware. There's a level of blissful unawareness that is really necessary for surviving childhood, but I had no idea. what I was or that I had any proclivity toward storytelling. Storytelling wasn't even, I mean, is that even a job? I mean, even today, I think to myself, that's not a job. I mean, a job is where you go and clock in and do this and do that, or you have an actual occupation. A storyteller is just someone who sits on the front porch. So I never viewed it as anything more than just who I was. I never really viewed it as a thing. So writing was born out of that. Writing is, just a form of storytelling, and music, which is maybe my biggest passion, my biggest thread in my life has always been music. I made my living as a professional musician for many years before I got into writing. And that is just another form of storytelling, which is, interesting to me. I never really considered that either. As I would sing, and I've been singing in church since I was a 7-year-old, playing piano in church since I was 9. I wasn't any good, but musical talent runs thin in a little church, so you take who you can get. And that, as I look back now, we played old hymns and all that. Every old hymn tells a story. Every old hymn accompanies a Bible story. So that's storytelling. And then the writing that I would do for fun as a child on a manual typewriter, which I still have, I would just tell stories, and my imagination would run wild as I'd sit in that little church and the preacher would be preaching, and our preacher only preached 2 good sermons with us in the time that he was with us, the day he joined us and the day he left. I remember entertaining myself with my imagination. I'd look up into the rafters and I envisioned, Superman, or I envisioned something. And
Sure.
I think now, even that's storytelling. You're with yourself, imaginary friends that I had growing up. That's storytelling. So I don't know. Storytelling has just always been one of the biggest pieces of who I am. And it wasn't until I graduated from community college that I really applied myself toward storytelling in the written form. And that was kind of when my life changed.
Sure.
Because other people started reading these stories and paying attention to it. That was maybe when I first realized that maybe in our nation right now, storytelling is not nearly as common, and it's not nearly as applauded as it used to be. Long ago, you would sit with your elders or with somebody who had a funny story to deliver. And that was important. That was entertainment. Everybody'd kind of gather around to listen to a good story. They always had to have kind of a formula of how they went. They always had to end with a punchline that was funny. So they were always delivered with humor. Storytelling that's a huge, important piece of storytelling that a lot of people in today's world neglect. Humor is how stories throughout history have been delivered successfully. I realize now that it's kind of for lack of a better term, a dying art form. And yet it's such an essential art form because storytelling is what preserves our culture. Storytelling is what arguably is our culture. Our culture is story. When you look at old folk songs and the folk ballads that people were writing long before people were writing music to go on the radio or to be famous or to have their 15 minutes of stardom, all of the old songs, the ballads, they were all stories set to a melody so that they could be easier remembered and passed down, therefore, to the next generation or passed across great distances and regions from one village to the next, from one community to the next. To me, that is something that is so important to our ancestors that the digital age causes us to neglect. That's part of what got me into storytelling and why I feel that it's actually kind of essential.
And I appreciate that. One of the regrets, I guess it's a regret, when you're a child and you're growing up around your family. I had one grandparent, I had lots of aunts and uncles. And then after my parents passed away in 2014, 2015, I looked at my brother and I said, I have about 101 unanswered questions that I am never going to get the answers to at this point. And I've kind of lived with that. And that's a little bit why I started this little crazy podcast, because people are like, podcast? Can you make money with that? I'm like, I don't know. Wasn't really the plan. And so I've just tried to record other people's stories that I've encountered in my life, and some are family, and some are like you, people I've literally never met, but just want to hear their story.
Yeah, well, that's how I feel about stories too. I love to hear other people's stories. I find myself kind of much like that little boy who used to sit at the feet of the elders, looking for a story, hoping to hear a good one.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That was good. Now, as I look at your website and you seem to write about every day, what is your process you go through today? Because I resonate with a lot of these stories, and you had one just here recently called The High Tech World. I just sit there and go, yeah. And you mentioned front porches in that one, and that's where a lot of stories were told when I was growing up. But
Yeah,
take me through your process. What's that like to crank something out every day?
I find that it's hard for me to process my own life without writing it now. And that's I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing,
Mm,
but I find that going to a certain place, like a new location, a vacation or a trip, and not being able to write about it sort of takes away from the experience. But when you're able to write about it, I get to fully immerse myself in the experience in a way that I would not be able to do without writing it. So I find that writing has worked its way into my daily routine in much the same way that drinking a cup of coffee or going to the bathroom.
yeah.
And maybe they're actually a little bit alike. But the act of writing helps me live a little bit deeper, which
Mm,
is sometimes it can be a chore because some days you don't feel like writing. But I find that I think what I enjoy most about my daily routine of writing, I am forced to locate the daily thread of some sort of daily grace that comes to me that I would have probably, had I not been writing, I probably wouldn't have even given credence to or noticed. It would have just gone by completely unnoticed. And now I'm learning every day through writing to notice the little acts of mercy that come to me every day. And for
sure.
that, I'm grateful because I really have learned so much through this process.
Do you have a special place when you're not on the road or whatever where you kind of you hear about writers, so they go off to this special room or this special place to write?
Well, I do write from my front porch. I have
Okay.
a little section set up on the porch, and that's real important to me. I love writing on my porch because it's conducive to the whole experience. The birds start singing in the morning at about 5:30, and I'm out there usually before sunrise. I wake up early. I kind of familiarize myself with the day's news only to a point because I can't read too much of them or I'll start to get down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I just kind of ruminate on something that maybe has happened the day before, or I'll read through. People are always sending me stories of positive things. One of those kind of resonates with me. I'll dig into it and start researching and writing. So the porch is really good for me. I like to be outside, so that helps.
We talked a little bit before we started. Is there a pivotal moment in your life that made you what you are today?
Oh, there's been many. I guess one real pivotal moment was I got turned down to go to a major university. I had applied to their writing program, and then I applied to their music program, and I'd got turned down from both of those. I had already rented an apartment on campus. I was an adult student because I dropped out of school when I was in the seventh grade, and
Oh, okay.
I came back to school as an adult and graduated community college, and then I applied to a major university, which was Florida State. So as I was there trying to get into Florida State, and I'd been told that sorry, your transcripts or your high school transcripts, which were non-existent, give us pause, so we don't need you here at the school. I thought I was done. I
Mm,
thought I thought life was, my dreams were kind of done. And that's when I started writing in earnest. And that's actually when my life took a completely different trajectory. And I'm glad that God didn't answer that prayer of letting me into
mm,
school, because I would have never been doing what I'm doing, which is probably what I'm supposed to be doing.
yeah.
So that was kind
Yeah.
of pivotal.
Hmm. That's interesting. You ever want to go back there and do a show or?
Well, it's funny, I've done a few things in Tallahassee where FSU is, and they just go terribly, 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 but that's been years ago now, and so there's something about that city that just doesn't like me. So
Yeah.
we just got a call to do another one for the first time in like 10 years almost this year. So I think I'm going to try it, and we will see how that goes.
Yeah.
Because it could be a nightmare. Who knows?
Well, seems like God put you on the path he had intended instead of higher education.
Yeah, I agree.
Back to a road trip. Imagine today you could head out on a road trip with anyone, living or deceased. Who would it be? Where would you go? What would you talk about?
I'm lucky because one of the great things about having an imagination is you can kind of imagine this story already as it's happened. So I feel like I've already done it. But still, if I had to choose, I might choose someone like Mark Twain.
Okay.
I might sit in the car with him and just listen to how he does what he does, because to me, he was a remarkable human being. He went through so much and yet retained an insatiable sense of humor that lasted with him all the way to the end. And to me, that is incredible how he did it, how he did that. I mean, people read him and they think of a humorist and they think of a funny storyteller, and yet this man endured death upon death. One of his daughters drowned in the bathtub. His brother died in an explosion. He went through so much. And yet for him to retain such a positive and humorous outlook on everything. I mean, and then the fact that his material, I still read his material a little bit maybe not every day, but every week or so. It still retains its humor. And that is amazing for someone in the 19th century. Our language is completely different. And our dialect his dialect is almost unrecognizable from the dialect we have today. So the fact that his humor still lands with modern audiences in a timeless way is almost miraculous. I don't know how he did that, how he transcended the language barrier of his era into utter timelessness. But that's someone I'd like to know.
That would be a fun road trip. Hey, as we're coming to the end of our little virtual road trip, but leave my listeners with some life advice. Maybe it's on living a better life or living their best life. What would you tell people if they were in a room with you?
To say something, I would say what I heard from she's deceased now, but she was in her late 90s when I met her, and I wrote about her. She was in a nursing home, and I was supposed to find a good story, and I didn't know where else to go but a nursing home because there's no better place. So I walked into the nursing home. It was a cold call, basically. The staff let me in, buzzed me through the doors. I went up to the lady behind the counter. I said, "Do you have anybody in here with a good story?" And she said, "Son, they've all got good stories." They introduced me to a woman named Miss Catherine, and she had her own little back bedroom there, a nice little room. I walked in, and she was drinking a Miller Lite. And she said, "Do you want one?" I said, no, thank you." She said, "Well, I've been drinking a Miller Lite every day, only one every day since I was 14 years old, because the doctor back in those days told me that I needed one for my stomach. And so I drink one every day."
Okay.
I sat there with this older woman who was drinking a beer, and I asked her eventually if she had any advice on what she thought the meaning of life was, or what she thought the great point of this life was. And I was expecting something very different than what she said. But she said, "Life is about F-U-N." She said, "Life, if you're not having fun, what are you doing?" And I said, "Really? So you think this whole life is just about fun?" She said, "Think of all the things you find that are fun." And I did. I started to think about these things. She said, what you're experiencing when you're having fun is an expression of love." She said, "And it's the greatest kind of love there is. If you're having fun, you're loving yourself, you're loving others, and you're loving who made you. That's the highest level of humanity, when you're having fun." She said, "So if you can find a way to have fun every moment of every day," she said, "that is what life is all about," to her. And I've never forgotten that. Life, to me, I don't know if I can do it. I'm miserable at enacting it, but I think she's right to some degree. Life is about F-U-N.
That's great. And maybe in our what's going on in the world today, maybe that's what we need to take pause and take this advice, right?
I think we would all be in a lot better moods. And we would treat each other with a lot more respect and kindness if we were having fun.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That was really good.
Well, thanks for asking me.
Okay, I mentioned you have a new book, Over Yonder. I received it in the mail from a week or two ago, and I don't typically read novels. That's not what you find on my bookshelf, but I told you early on, I could not put it down once I started. It was like I had to know what was going to happen. And I told you I appreciated the short chapters because I felt like I was making really great progress as I worked through this book. I literally just finished it coming back from a trip. And your writing style, I said vividness. I don't know. The descriptions that you put into it are just amazing to me. Can you talk about just for a minute where this book came from?
Well, the book came from, I had read a story about a priest, an Episcopal priest who had gone to jail. And I read about the struggles that came with that among many other things. The thing I like about fiction the most, about building a story, is, and this is a kind of a common expression in the writing world, in the publishing world at least, they say, if you want to read fiction, read nonfiction. If you want to read the truth, read fiction. And there's a reason for that, because when you write nonfiction, when anybody writes nonfiction, even journalists, you have to move things around a little bit to make the story work. No such thing as a reporter of nonfiction. You have to, even in the way that you tell a story, you naturally tell it in a story-like manner. You're not just reporting facts. If a story were told the exact way it happened, it would be impossible just to report every fact. So you tell it in a storytelling way. You skip over certain things. You speed the timeline up just for a moment. That's telling a story. So in essence, that's not accurate nonfiction. Whereas when you tell fiction, you get a chance to completely make the story blow by blow what you need it to be in order to deliver what you want it to say. Whereas you can't edit things out of nonfiction. If it happened, it happened. Whereas in fiction, you can maneuver things around much easier. And therefore, you find yourself being a little more honest than you would even be able to be in nonfiction. I mean, this is a long explanation, but
I like it.
It's actually a fascinating process, because once you start writing fiction, you find that you're behind the anonymity of a story like that. You're telling so much of yourself. You're telling a lot of truth as it applies to you, at least. And you're being even more vulnerable than you would be in nonfiction. And that's why I like it. It's a lot of fun. It's a soul searching experience. And every time you create a character, what you're really doing is diving into your head, and you're bringing out a piece of you, identifying with that piece of you, and you're giving it a name, and you're giving it an identity. And then you just watch what it does, and it's all you. And then when it's over, it's kind of sad, because a piece of you is no longer in your constant consciousness.
Yeah. And I have to add, so this book took so many twists and turns. I was like, oh my gosh, what is coming next? But I have to ask, as a writer, do you know when you start writing, do you know how it's going to end?
No. And that's the fun of it, because then it becomes a lot more like life. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It's like the old Jewish expression, man plans, God laughs. Well, it's the same with writing a book. When you write a book, if you start at all to impose, for me, and this is just my process, but if I start at all to impose an outline or an idea of how this is actually going to happen, it is quickly abandoned. It is quickly torn asunder. And the characters end up doing what they want to do. They don't care about me, and they end up going their own direction. It's so fun to watch, because there is no way to plan it. And that's just like life. There is absolutely no way to plan it, because tomorrow something's going to happen that was not planned, and you're going to have to adjust.
There was near the end of the story, and I just wanted to share this because it stood out to me as it brought back memories, number one, but it's near the end, and it said the ride reminded him of drives his dad used to take his family on when Woody was a kid. There was a time in this nation when the great American family went out for Sunday drives. When did those days disappear? When did we get so busy that we quit enjoying the drive? And that just brought back memories of my childhood. Just reading that little simple paragraph.
Oh, that's so, I miss those days. We used to go on drives, and I think about that. I think about how nobody, not a lot of people at least, go on just a long drive, and nobody poses for family photographs in front of their Buick anymore. I mean,
No.
it's amazing to think that, get the whole family together in front of the old Chevrolet and let's get a picture.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Sean, this has been most enjoyable for me.
Oh, well, me too.
And I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you allowing me on your show.
But anyway, before we leave, do want to tell people how to find you. You do that. Just remind people again, if you're in Cincinnati, November 2nd, I'll post a link in my show notes for tickets to that and to Sean's website. But leave my listeners with how to find you.
Yeah, you can find me pretty much anywhere. I'm kind of like stepping in horse dookie. I'm kind of all over the place. You can find me on my music on Spotify. You can find my writing on my website, which is my name, SeanDietrich.com or SeanoftheSouth.com.
So we'll look forward to seeing you on the 2nd.
Yes, sir.
And, can't wait. And again, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Dan. This is great.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dan the Road Trip Guy. You can find me online at dantheroadtripguy.com. I hope you'll follow the show so that you don't miss any future episodes. I'd love your feedback, so message me. And I hope you'll share the show with your family and friends so that they can enjoy the conversations I have with my guest. And be sure when you're with your family and friends to record stories before it's too late. And for now, remember, keep driving and keep having conversations.